So, all right, I think we're on.
I should have 1 minute, or less than a minute.
Okay. All right, I'm just going by that. This is always off.
You're on? Okay. I call to order the May 24th, 2023 Area Board of Zoning Appeals of Tippecanoe County meeting. First item on the agenda is roll call, please.
Steve Clevenger,
Present.
Gary Schroeder.
Here.
Tom Andrew. Present. Robert Novak.
Present.
Michelle Dennis. Ed Butts.
Present.
Dustin Grove.
Present.
Quorum present.
Thank you. And now I'll take approval of the minutes from the last meeting.
I move to approve the minutes from the April 26th, 2023 ABZA public hearing as submitted.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Any corrections or comments? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Minutes are approved. New business.
Good evening, David Hiddle with the Area Plan Commission. In your new business section, we have before you a proposed set of new forms for BZA petitions, land use petitions. What we've done is we've taken a couple decades worth of forms that had kind of been updated in piecemeal fashion and then sort of lost synchronization with one another, and we've eliminated a lot of them, consolidated a lot of them, and updated all of them to create uniform design and just make them as efficient and clear as possible. We've also updated a set of instructions and included brief instructions for each of the forms to help the petitioner understand what to do. So these are located on the back page of your BZA bylaws, which is replicated on page 23 of your packet. And because it's in the bylaws, any amendment to the bylaws needs to be approved by the BZA, which is why we're here with these improved forms. So they are here for your review and hopefully approval tonight.
Thank you. And I guess I'll take a motion so we can discuss.
I move that we hear and approve the proposed bylaw amendments.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Are there any questions or comments? I guess one comment I have is I like the consistency and look of the new forms, and especially with the instructions on them as well.
Thank you.
And I didn't actually go through and compare form to form from the old to the new, just because they're so different, and figured it would take a lot of time. But I did look these over, and I do think I didn't see anything that stood out.
Fair enough. Thanks.
Anyone else look them over, have any comments? Hearing none. We have a motion to approve the new forms and instructions to the bylaws. Those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now take the public hearing motion.
I move that there be incorporated in the public hearing portion of each application be heard this evening and become part of the evidence at such hearing, the Unified Zoning Ordinance, the Unified Subdivision Ordinance, the Comprehensive Plan, the bylaws of the Area Board of Zoning Appeals, the application and all documents filed therewith, the staff report and recommendations on the applications be heard this evening, and responses from checkpoint agencies.
I second.
Motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. And I will take the continuance, please.
I move to continue BZA 2104 Archview Properties to the June 28, 2023 ABZA public hearing.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. If you're here for BZA 2104 Archview Properties LLC, and that is, looks like it's off of Yeager Road, south of Hawthorne Ridge. That will not be heard this evening. That will be heard on June 28th at our next meeting. I'd like to describe our procedures for tonight's meeting. Each case will be heard following a motion and a second from the board. We will ask staff to report on its findings. Following the staff report, we will ask the petitioner to present his or her case, after which anyone wishing to support the petitioner's request for variance or special exception will be asked to come forward. After hearing from the petitioner and those speaking on his or her behalf, you will ask those speaking against the petition to present their arguments. The petitioner will then be allowed to rebut arguments raised by those in opposition to his or her petition. Following the rebuttal, the board may wish to ask questions of the petitioner, supporters, and opponents of the petition or of the staff. The staff will have the opportunity at this time to make any necessary clarifying comments. We will then vote by use of a prescribed ballot. 4 votes are necessary to make any decision. In the absence of 4 votes for or against, the petition is automatically continued to the next meeting. Please observe the following guidelines for the sake and time to fairness of all. State your name and address for the record before you speak. And if you do, not the petitioner, and do speak for or against, we do have a sign-in sheet on the staff table. If you would please sign up after you speak. Limit your remarks to 5 minutes or less. Do not repeat arguments that have been brought up by others. Remember that all visual aids used to support your arguments will remain the property of the board. Cell phones must be turned off while the meeting is in session. Please step out of the room before using your cell phone. With that in mind, we'll hear the first case.
I move to hear and vote on BZA 2097, Robert and Julia Coolidge. Petitioners requesting the following variance from a proposed addition to a single-family residence in an R1 zone. The increase, number 1, to increase the maximum coverage by all buildings from 30% or 3,787 square feet to 33%, which is 4,116 square feet, an increase of 3% or 329 square feet. That's UZO 2-1-6, and to reduce the minimum vegetative coverage from the required 40%, 5,050 square feet, to 37.5%, 4,787 square feet, 4,781 square feet. UZO 2-1-6, the property is located at 200 East Navajo Street, Lot 111, and Wabash Shores, Second Edition in West Lafayette, Wabash 8 Southwest 23-4. Continued from the April 2023 ABZA hearing at petitioner's request. That's their second continuance.
I second.
Have a motion and a second, and we'll hear from staff, please. Amanda?
Thank you. So, the petitioners are located in West Lafayette. You can see here that they are part of an older platted lot in West Lafayette, surrounded by all single-family homes, R1 zoning. It's an aerial of the area here. To the east is a church. Closer up of their site here. Actually, one thing I wanted to point out, their lot does not extend as far back as some of the other lots, or as most of the other lots on this cul-de-sac here, which contributes to the unusual nature of their property. The house here, they have a pool with a pool patio, the fenced-in backyard. Some of the additions are going to be in that pool area here. On the other side of the house, they are adding on to the garage on this side. Here's the driveway onto Chippewa, I believe. And then they are moving their front porch further to the south. Just a few pictures of the house here to give you an idea. The driveway will be added onto as well, as is common with, additions onto a garage when you add a third garage. They will not be widening the curb cut at all, but just adding on the concrete here for the driveway parking area. Here's the back of the house where one of the additions is going to go. And then a look at the backside of their lot. Again, this is all owned by the church next door, whereas further down here in the trees, the neighbors have all of that green space property on their lots. I think that was it. So considering the nature of this property, it is an unusual shape and size. However, because these are desired additions to an existing single-family house, staff just could not find a hardship, even though it is a practical hardship to not be able to expand the house here. The expansions all contributed to the lot coverage on the site. So the expanded driveway contributed to less vegetative coverage than what they required. And then the addition to the building contributes to them going over on the building coverage for the lot. So, as per the findings, these are not use variances. Granting these variances will not be injurious to the public health, safety, and general welfare of the community. Slightly increased building coverage and slightly decreased vegetative coverage will not negatively affect the general welfare of the public. Use and value of the area adjacent to the property will not be affected. The homes surrounding this property will not be impacted in any way from having more building coverage on this property and less vegetative coverage. The home is not being built any closer to those property lines, nor any higher than the existing home. The terms of the zoning ordinance are being applied to a situation that is not common. As I explained, the lot size and shape is not common to other properties in the area. However, it will not result in unusual or unnecessary hardship as defined in the zoning ordinance. They don't need to add these onto their home in order to use it as a single-family dwelling. They could and currently do meet the ordinance requirements for lot coverage without changing anything on the site. The hardship is self-imposed. The variances being sought are only to provide additional square footage for the petitioners at their request. And the variances sought do not provide only the minimum relief because there is no hardship. We are recommending denial for both of the variances. Thank you.
Thank you. Petitioner or his or her representative, please come forward.
Hi, Bob and Julia Coloch, 200 East Navajo, West Lafayette. So you just would like us to comment? Or the specific questions? Okay.
Any comments that you would like to make in support of your petition?
Sure. We just wanted to emphasize that the request for this is regarding functionality and security. Currently, the garage is a 1.5 garage, and we're just seeking to extend it so that we can put both cars inside, out of the elements and chance of theft or vandalism. The other issue beyond security would just be the functionality of the home. And so in order to make it more functional for living and storage purposes, there is no basement. It's a home built on partial slab, partial crawl space, and there is not a usable attic space. That is the additional functional request. And the only options really are, in order to stay within the minimum setbacks, are to put these smaller pieces on the different portions of the home that were described by Amanda. I think that was it.
Okay, thank you.
you.
Anyone wishing to speak in favor of the petition? Anyone in opposition to the petition? Comments, questions from the board? Dustin?
It looks like the garage door is for 2 vehicles, but you said that it's a 1.5 car garage? Could you explain how that works, please?
So we can get you on the record.
Apologies. Apologies. I'm sorry. Could you repeat that?
Sure. It looks from the picture like a two-car garage, but you said it's 1.5, so I was curious how it's a 1.5.
That is, our architect has described it as such. You can't fit two cars. The garage door is large, but you can't fit two cars in the garage. So I'm kind of going off of what the descriptions have been provided to us and the knowledge that we can't get two cars in there.
Just to add to that, it's hard to see in the picture, but in the back there's a section that's comes out from the side, and that holds like the water heater and the water heater and our general heating. So it cuts off a good portion of the usable garage space.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board? We have 2 ballots. Thank you very much.
Variance 1, the ayes have it 5-1, so 5 yeses, 1 no. That's variance 1. On variance 2, the ayes have it 5-1, that is 5 yeses and 1 no for variance number 2.
Both variances have been granted, and we'll hear the next case, please.
I'm going to recuse myself from items 2105, 2106, and 2107.
Please let the record reflect that Dustin Grove recuses himself from the next 3 cases.
I move to hear,
2105, 2106, and 2107.
I move to hear and vote on BZA 2105, Nathaniel Gustus, petitioners requesting a special exception to allow a transient guest house operating 24 hours a day, 7 days per week, for a maximum of 6 guests in an R1U zone. The property is part of Lot 9 and northern subdivision of Chauncey, more commonly known as 267 Lincoln Street, West Lafayette, Wabash 7 Southwest, 23-4, with conditions and commitments.
I second.
Thank you. Again, David Hiddle with the Area Plan Commission. You have a number of letters that have been submitted, 14 of them in the packet that was mailed. Those were all submitted by mailing day a week ago. And there have been 5 more that have been received in the time since, so those are circulating amongst you now. Total of 19 letters. I think all of them were in opposition to this request. This is 267 Lincoln Street in West Lafayette in the New Chauncey neighborhood. It is a property, single-family dwelling lot, conventional single-family dwelling lot that is zoned R1U, surrounded by similar houses, also zoned R1U. You can see an aerial photograph there. On Lincoln, all of these houses, most of them have detached rear garages, but they're not served by alleys. They're pretty much all served by curb cuts off of the street and then driveways leading back. This is the site plan showing the house here, and then the driveway leading from Lincoln Street back to a detached two-car garage. A photograph of the property from the street, and a photograph from the other side looking down the driveway towards the garage. So this is a transient guest house special exception request. This is the first one that's been requested for the city of West Lafayette. These regulations have been in place for several years, but West Lafayette just adopted them, I think, mid-last year. So this is the first time that they've had this kind of request. There are three different kinds of transient guest rentals, according to the ordinance, three different levels of intensity, if you will. The first is called a transient guest room. It is treated as a home occupation. It doesn't require a permit for the owner. In that situation, it's going to be owner-occupied, and a person would be using typically Airbnb, but there are some other sites that could be used to rent a room within the home for a short period of time. The next level is what's called a transient guest rental. It does require a permit from the municipality. It is a permitted use in the residential districts. It does not require a special exception. That pertains to situations where the owner does live in the house but is occasionally away, perhaps on vacation, and while away for short and infrequent periods of times can rent the house as a transient rental. And then the third category, which is what's in play tonight, is called a transient guest house. It does require a special exception. It does require a permit by the municipality. And this is a circumstance where the home is dedicated essentially to transient rental use. The owner does not live in the home, and the use of the property is going to be for short periods of time, typically less than 30 days. So the key factor here is that the owner is not living in the home with regards to the rental of the property. I did take a quick look. It's a little bit bleached, but this is the area of West Lafayette showing Wabash River on the east, and then Northwestern and Purdue University on the far west, essentially between Stadium Avenue on the south and Leslie, Kingston on the north. It's about a half square mile in area, and this is just taken today right off the Airbnb site. It shows you each of those dollar figures is an Airbnb rental. So it gives you an idea of the current distribution of these rentals in the area, and the red X is showing the subject site on Lincoln. There's two different rentals on Lincoln. I don't know if one of those dollar figures pertains to this site or not. They tend to scramble the actual address a little bit so that it's not immediately apparent to the potential buyer exactly where it is, but there's two different listed Airbnb rentals on Lincoln Street at the moment. This would be one of them. Petitioner has indicated that there would be a maximum of 6 guests. Staff has required a condition that there be no more than one booking at any given time, meaning you can't have 6 individual people rent a room each. It has to be one party booking the house at any given time, using up to 6 rooms. And it's also requiring that there be a permit issued, of course, by the jurisdiction, in this case, the city of West Lafayette. Our determination with regards to support or opposition is based obviously on the findings. You can see those on page 50 and 51 of the staff report. There are no variances being requested, and this is a special exception use per the ordinance for this zoning district. So that brings us to really the performance-oriented findings, and with that pertains to traffic generation, outdoor lighting, noise production, and hours of operation. These things in staff's eyes would be pretty much par for the course with regard to the general use of the homes in this area. You know, it's a pretty typical residential use, compact urban situation. No additional lighting is proposed. And obviously, it would be strictly a residential situation. No non-residential use would be permitted. So with that, staff is supportive of this request and would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. And we'll ask for a petitioner or his or her representative.
Good evening, Nate Gustus, 874 Rose Street, West Lafayette. So I am applying for this special exception to use 267 Lincoln Street as a short-term rental. My wife and I and our 3 children have lived at 874 Rose Street since August of 2014. We purchased 267 Lincoln Street in January of 2021 when we began making improvements to the property. Prior to my purchase, this property had been tenant occupied for 30 years. Per the records request that I made to the West Lafayette Police Department, from October 2015 until June 2020, the West Lafayette Police were dispatched to this home 27 times. A registered sex offender was living at the home, as most of the neighbors can remember. This was very concerning to everyone living nearby, and it took nearly 5 years for the neighbors to monitor and call the police to eventually get the resident to move out. Could you skip the slide? So this is the condition of the home when I purchased it, during renovations, and then a current picture of the property exterior. I worked with the City of West Lafayette Historic Preservation to comply with the standards of the interior, to remove the aluminum siding that was on the property, install a new roof, and make other exterior improvements to the property, restoring the wood windows, etc. So I purchased this property due to the fact that it was the most distressed property in our neighborhood. I wanted to improve the neighborhood. My children play at Lincoln Park and travel by there on their way to and from school each and every day. My intent was to bring 267 Lincoln Street back to life while better being able to manage who occupies this home. My family and I have invested a great deal of our time, money, and energy into restoring this property. From May 2022 till March of this year, I had a family from Japan living in the home. They were here at the university doing cancer research, and my next door neighbor had connected me to them that they were looking for a place to live short-term. So I had fully furnished the home. While they were living in the home, the new ordinance had passed, and I was not able to officially put the home on the short-term rental market because I wasn't sure how long they were going to be there. We live in a community full of people from different backgrounds and experiences, and being near a campus neighborhood, we all have student rentals nearby. Student rentals offer mixed opinions depending upon the day. Could you skip the slide? So this is on one of my daily walks that I take around the neighborhood. This was on Sunday, May 7th, and so you can see a typical student rental on the morning after a Saturday party. Beer cans strewn about, red Solo cups and front yards. It's a pretty typical occurrence on a Sunday morning. Student rentals are in high demand, and there's very little accountability for a landlord or tenant to maintain the property condition. Let's skip one more. The next slide is the same walk on the same morning, showing 2 guest-occupied short-term rentals. An argument could be made that short-term rentals are better maintained and taken care of as a result of the reviews of the property owners by guests for future stays. If a home is left in poor condition and not maintained, it will receive poor reviews and impact future stays. I'm a vested member of the West Lafayette community. My children attend West Lafayette schools. I volunteer and coach West Lafayette youth sports. My family and I attend church in West Lafayette. I'm not an out-of-town investor without any sort of stake in our local community. Skip one more. So here's a few reasons on why I like short-term versus long-term. Short-term offers me flexibility as an owner. If I want to block out a week or 2 weeks or a weekend for my family or friends to come and stay while they're visiting from out of state, I can do that instead of having them stay in a hotel. I believe there's less wear and tear on a short-term rental compared to an annual rental. It allows me an opportunity to get into a property quickly and address any sort of maintenance concerns as they arise versus waiting for the lease to end and a tenant to move out to discover damage. I can enforce more strict rules, a set quiet period, maximum number of guests. And to further clarify, the maximum number of guests I'm seeking is a family plus 2 unrelated, so a maximum of 6 people in the home, rather than, which also would be the 3 unrelated that meets the West Lafayette City ordinance. Guests are required to be registered and provide ID, and then they're also reviewed by the hosts, and they can be prevented from being able to rent in the future. So with that all being said, I realize the exception of allowing a short-term rental can be a challenge for our local community. I am part of the neighborhood, and I am equally concerned. Additionally, I will monitor the number of guests coming and going with the doorbell camera and monitor the sound level with a decibel meter that will alert guests if the level inside the home reaches an unacceptable level. Parties are not permitted, and the short-term rental service, along with West Lafayette Police, will be notified for any violation, resulting in the immediate removal of the guest and immediate cancellation of their stay. Hopefully, with my plan and commitment, that I can garner your approval with this special exception request.
Thank you. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of the petition?
Hi, I'm Andrew Walgamuth. I live at 1705 Ocala in Lafayette. So I don't live in the neighborhood, but I'm a real estate broker, and property rights are important to me and my clients. And I think it's very important that owners have the right to use their property in the way that they see fit, so that they can afford to take care of the property. I mean, you can see in the pictures how much better the property looks than what it did before. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor?
Hello, my name is Ada King. I live at 237 Connolly Street in West Lafayette, and I'm speaking in support of this proposed short-term rental. I think that responsibly, locally owned short-term rentals have as much of a place in our community as any rental. I'm glad to see that our community is creating and enforcing new regulations to hold short-term rental homeowners to a higher standard. From my perspective, the lack of enforcement of student rentals is consistently more of a problem than the short-term rentals. On our block of Connolly, we have one short-term rental and one other house that used to be a short-term rental. My family actually rented the short-term rental on the corner of our block a year ago when my son graduated from West Side, so that we could host family for his graduation weekend and have them as close as possible. I loved having them just down the street from us in a cozy house where they could hang out in the living room or walk down to our house to share a meal. The other house on our block that was a short-term rental was terribly managed and had complaints from neighbors. The owner had it listed as able to sleep over a dozen guests. I'm thankful that there were complaints and that it is no longer rented as that type of improper short-term rental. But now that it's a regular student rental, the yard looks forgotten, and there seem to be a lot of students living there. There's also a tattered-looking hammock hanging in the front yard from one corner of their porch railing. I believe that short-term rentals are, on the whole, more well-kept both inside and out than student rentals. I actually live next door to a student rental, and just this week I had to once again contact the landlord, who lives out of state, to let them know that the landscaping wasn't being kept and that part of their garage is rotting away. They were unaware of both, and so far nothing has changed. Unlike these student rentals, guests won't stay in shabby short-term rentals. A bad review from an unkempt lawn or a dirty interior can ruin a host's chances to have future guests. This drives owners to keep them looking neat and tidy, both inside and out. As Nate mentioned, if you were to look at all the short-term rentals in our community, I bet there's not one that you'd mistake for a crummy student rental. Unlike a lot of landlords for long-term rentals in our community, the Gustuses live right around the corner from their proposed short-term rental. I'm confident that they want their community to remain a great place to live and will work hard to ensure the short-term rental guests' rules are followed and the outside of the property looks as nice as well. This feels like an appropriately cumbersome process created by the leaders in our community to filter out owners who don't take things seriously, and the Gustuses are proving that they are willing to work within these regulations. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaking in favor? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition?
Hi, my name is Catherine Landy, and I'm at 221 Conley Street. I live next to the home that was just mentioned that was previously a short-term rental and is now a student rental house. I feel very passionately about this, so forgive my shaky voice. It's been a hell of a year. I would like to first start out with saying that the position of the short-term housing rental and the student housing situation is a false dilemma. I don't know why we need to compare the opportunity one to another. Why can't we just have opportunities for families moving into the neighborhood to have an affordable and a nice place to live? It's taking away the market. It is also something that not all of the guests at short-term rentals are bad. They don't have malintent. Not everyone is there to party. Not everyone there is drunk. I have seen handfuls of sober families who have come and stayed at 217 Conley. However, these guests have often been as disturbing as people that have had parties. We were left without courses of action when there were disturbances, and I could not take action with local law enforcement, with code enforcement, with Airbnb or VRBO. There's a lack of understanding of the cadence of the neighborhood and that the sounds greatly travel between the old houses situated 20 feet from each other. That means when people are arriving to the property at 2 in the morning and trying to get in, you're hearing doors slam. It's alarming. I've also had people try to enter my own home with good intent, but they don't know the address and we're trying to get into my home, which is also concerning when I have a 1-year-old baby. I know that the petitioner lives on Rose Street, and I want to say that I respect the commitment and maintaining the neighborhood and making sure it's a safe, conducive place. However, the owner of the 217 short-term rental that is no longer, is now student housing, she has said to me, she is Z Cubed Homes LLC, Sharon Zhang. She lives on Cherry Lane, and she said she also lives in the community and has the well-being in mind. Since I've had this discussion with her one time in person, I have never seen her again, and that was last August. My property since then has been puked on, urinated on, guests attempting to break and enter because they didn't know which house they were staying in. I have been verbally assaulted and threatened. And this are by a range of different guests, and it's not fun. These instances are also true for the student rented properties. I have a student rental behind me at 202 DeHart, and now students live at 217 Conley. I also would like to ask the board, have you considered short-term rental proximity to parks? And the Lincoln Park is a few lots down, and as the petitioner said, that it is something that he's aware of. There is now going to be an increase of transient traffic and people who are not familiar with neighborhood kids who are riding their bikes, winging in and out of driveways, rearranging their cars, and I have witnessed all of this. I have seen my neighbor almost get hit as she runs down the street. I have seen kids have to stop and parents scream their names out because people just aren't familiar. I've also seen neighborhood pets, cats, dogs, almost get struck by vehicles. And that is very scary, especially as a new mother with a 1-year-old who is now on the move. And we do go to Lincoln Park since it's a block away. And finally, there are still city code violations. The most frequent are the trash overflow, and the garbage bins are just piling up. They're also left on the streets. I'm not saying that that goes away with student housing, but it's a continuous problem. And I have had vermin that have been attracted to the property, unshoveled snow, and maybe this won't be the case with the petitioner living nearby, but I was promised something different from another neighborhood owner as well. So it is concerning and not in the best interest of the neighborhood. And I also want to say, too, that it isn't always just the guests of the home. There's going to be cleaning staff coming in and out of the property as well. That's something that, as a neighbor, I don't have control over. And it's when you really want to just sit down and relax. It's on a Friday night. You know that it's been a long week. You finally sit down in your chair, and then here comes the people who are renting the house. They're all excited. They're in vacation mode. I used to stay at Airbnbs and VRBOs all the time with my family and with my friends, And it is something now that when you look back, you just are excited because you're together and that's normal, but these houses are very close together. And so I thank you for your time, and any questions, I'm happy to answer them as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaking in opposition. And just, when one person finishes, just please come up and so we keep things moving.
I'm Bob Schauer. I live at 242 Connolly Street, and I've lived there since 1980. And it's really been a wonderful community for the past 43 years, and I appreciate living in an orderly and orderly place with well-behaved neighbors and good police and fire protection. I've enjoyed watching the local kids grow up and become teachers, engineers, doctors, and architects. We've had the Indiana's Mr. Football on our street. We had one of the state's top cross-country runners. Our side yard is adjacent to the backyard of 267 Lincoln. It's R1 residential area that requires not more than 3 unrelated people to occupy one address. The special exemption request, they have up to 6 guests at a time. It's a small house and parking in the neighborhood is limited. There are often houses changing hands. If an exception is granted to this one house, I wonder if we will soon be a neighborhood of transient houses. We have experience with transients on Connolly Street, and the guests have been ill-behaved partiers. The house has required a lot of police attention. We have a few student houses, and when you get some new students in, the police have to come and train them. Well, with transients, the police don't have, they're only here for such a short time. How do they get them to behave? They're going to be gone pretty soon, so they seem to just not care. There's a shortage of housing in West Lafayette, so if the owner doesn't want to live in his house, he should have no trouble renting it to a family, or, and fewer than the 6 people anyway, and or should have no trouble selling it. And that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, gentlemen, young lady. My name is Mike Burgess. I live at 238 Conley Street. Over the years, I have raised my family in West Lafayette. It's been a good place. I've noticed over the years, Purdue has added, went from 25,000 people when I went to school back in the 70s to over 60,000, according to Mitch Daniels, when a young man was killed last year. You guys have done a great job bringing in industry into the county, but there is no place for people to live when they come into this county. All these people I know that want to come in here or even living in here in the construction industry cannot find a place to live. Yes, you can rent this place out. You can get a short-term rental. My question is, I have a college house down the street from us. We live on Connolly Street. They have, I think, 8 to 9 people living in it. They're all related. And every time I talk to Rick Walker over at the code enforcement, they say, oh, they're all related. I would like, Mr. Burns, you're an attorney, I would like to ask you, how can West Lafayette enforce the, people that are related? If you're going to say 6 people, how come all of a sudden now you're going to bring in the girlfriends and the boyfriends? He may say 6, but all of a sudden it'll be 12 or 14 people. There's no place to park in West Lafayette. For crying out loud. Go down any street in springtime and help out. I'm sorry I've rambled on, but the other people have made the same point. Yes, the guests are rude, and this is my neighborhood. I pay taxes. I don't need to be insulted at 3 o'clock in the morning, have some, young drunk kid or young old drunk lady telling me to go stick it in my shorts. You know what I mean? That's an embarrassment. And these people are supposed to be college-educated people. So please, I would ask you not to have any more long-term rental. Thank you very much. Mike Burgess, 238 Connolly.
Thank you.
Zachary Bale, 124 Connolly Street. Thanks for this opportunity and democracy. We're here as a community to discuss the petition BZA 2105, which asks the question, should we deviate from the current uses designated under the UZO for an R1 U zone property by granting this special exception and allow a transient guest house at 267 Lincoln Street? 19 letters have come in now that we heard that are included in your packet, and all were against this deviation. No statutorily required notified neighbor was in favor of granting this exception. And this was not a NIMBY fluke. If you expanded your circle of notification to the entirety of New Chauncey neighborhood, the overwhelming response would be to deny this petition. It is not special, it is not celebrated, it is not a positive contribution except to the business owner's balance sheet. The transient guest house at 267 is, as many have stated, injurious to the New Chauncey's current property owners and designated residential zoning uses. According to a public records request I received in March, there are 50 transient guest properties in West Lafayette. 13, over 25% of which are in and around the New Chauncey neighborhood, from Connolly to Robinson to DeHart to East Sunset to Stadium to North Chauncey and beyond. And these are just the ones that are registered with the city. How many exist under the radar? Reading through the report the APC had provided, I'm reminded of the agency's research processes. When comparing the document to the application provided by Nathaniel, the report simply regurgitates the petitioner's content as if it was thoughtfully and independently generated by the staff. The report openly admits it's not clear how many transient guest properties exist in this neighborhood. We saw the quick map. But as I just shared, the data does exist. The staff simply didn't ask the city of West Lafayette for it, which calls into question the rigor of the report and this process. Due to these 13 grandfathered units of their functional namesake, our current properties and uses have already been suffering. A review of the letters, a query to the WLPD, a discussion with city councilors would have highlighted these injuries, but these inquiries were not pursued. The report states that 6 guests are consistent with other existing uses and structures. As we all learned, that's not true. West Lafayette's rental inspection program clearly states only 3 unrelated people can be occupants and no exceptions for transient guest houses. For parking, the petitioner simply had the numbers 1 to 2. Neighbors and I have observed multiple cars parked for transient houses, ranging from 1 to 6 or more. Cars are often parked on the street, despite the presence of large driveways. And just 3 houses down from 267 is Lincoln Park, as we heard. It's a valuable asset for the neighborhood, especially the children, where they run, ride, and play up and down the already congested street. This deviation, with its increased intensity of traffic, driven by people who are unfamiliar with the area, the park, and its current uses, creates risk for injuries of people and property. And regarding the lighting, the intense and horrifying light issues come from the corner market on Robinson, not at homes, thankfully on Lincoln. For the noise, living near 3 transient rentals, I have firsthand experienced that the noise extends beyond cars and walking. It often includes loud music of questionable taste and the sound of broken liquor and beer bottles on sidewalks and streets, posing a risk of injury to children, dogs, cyclists, etc., not to mention the cleanup. Other rentals also can have these issues, as we heard, but there's recourse with them because they are neighbors, if only for a year. For other pertinent information the petitioner shared, I'm invested in the success of the local neighborhood. It is unclear how that success is defined, so I talked to Nathaniel before this meeting, and he said, in short, it was being neighborly. And the neighborhood supports property improvements like the work done at 267. However, that work is not germane to the question about deviating from currently allowed uses. Similarly, long-term renting to a Japanese research assistant and his family is also irrelevant to the question before us tonight. If granted, one outcome will be driving prospective long-term renters and buyers towards other properties in the area. And maybe that's the intent. Remove houses from the available stock, cause injury to existing property owners and their uses by tainting the homes with the stain of transient short-term vacationers, and people will be forced to live elsewhere. Under the injury question, the petitioner brought up long-term student rentals. Again, this is irrelevant to the deviation question before us tonight. The current uses and success of the New Chauncey neighborhood rely on being a residential district, not a vacation district, not a visit your child at Purdue district, not let's throw a rent-a-house party and break some glass district. If guests to the area need a place to stay, there's an abundance of hotels and motels by Purdue. Another one was just approved by the APC. And as Peter mentioned in his letter, this exception would create a neighbor desert along Lincoln Street. The majority of New Chauncey residents, present and future, do not want to live or raise a family next to a transient guest house. We live here. This is our home, our street, our neighborhood, our city, and our community. Due to the very nature, transient guests will never know our perspective. But based on their reviews, they enjoy New Chauncey for the same reason why we're trying to protect it here tonight. A quiet, walkable, and beautiful neighborhood to live and raise a family. If this exception is allowed, the injuries will continue and New Chauncey will proceed walking towards becoming a no-future dormitory and motel district for Purdue University. Vote against this deviation. Thank you.
Thank you.
it's hard to follow that. Okay. I'm Dr. Rudolph, and I'm going to let you know, I'm a psychologist, so I deal with mental health, okay? And I live at 255 East Sunset Lane. I also live near a sex offender in my neighborhood, okay? I know exactly what house he's at. I know where I allow my children to go. This whole idea scares the hell out of me, I'll be honest. I have an 8-year-old and I have an 11-year-old. I do not want transient people being able to come back and forth. Would you like to live at the Holiday Inn or next to the Holiday Inn? Okay, ask yourself that. I purchased my house back in 1992, okay? I was one of those students whose parents kind of helped them buying a house, okay? But I stayed. I found I loved the neighborhood. And New Chauncey, there's a history to us. We actually, at one time, when the houses were affordable, they had a grant program so that they were trying to get more families in the area. That went for some time. I have a neighbor down the street who lives in one of those houses. We don't need more rentals. I am actually searching the neighborhood, trying to find a bigger house, because I need a bigger house. And they get swept up, they end up on the rental market. We get people from out of the country moving in the area, again, short-term, for a year or whatever, for school. I can't snag the house quick enough, all right? And then the property values have skyrocketed as a result, because now I'm looking at houses that a couple of years ago were only $200,000, and now they're $400,000 or $500,000. It's out of my price range, okay? I work at the VA. I don't make that much. We need more families. West Lafayette school system is hurting because we don't have enough families in our little tiny, perimeter of 3 miles or whatever. We don't have enough families in here. We have too many students. And again, I'm between 2 rentals now. When I first owned my home, I had 2 homeowners. I have rentals on each side of me. I have rentals in front of me. I had to call coding the other day because when we talk about the vermin problem, I had 10 mice last year. I had to totally redo my crawl space because the neighbors didn't mow the yard until mid-July. This isn't helping, okay? We don't need rentals. If he wants to sell the house, talk to me. I'm interested, okay? We need homeowners. We don't need rentals, okay? And then again, the concern, as he mentioned, the park. The park is a huge concern. My kids go to that park. Again, now I'm going to have to be more paranoid about my kids being at the park. And if you think, oh, my neighbors are okay, or the people that are kind of coming in and out are okay, no, they're not, okay? I see some of them. I've worked with some of the perpetrators. Would you want to live next door to the Holiday Inn? Ask yourself that before you vote, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Rich Hogan. I live at 825 Robinson Street, across the street from the Airbnb at 900 Robinson, what we talked about. I'd like to save us some time, if it's possible, and just ask people, instead of parading 20 people up here to talk for 5 minutes, could I just ask, how many of you are here to protest this, to speak against it? Yeah, you saw the 19 letters, you see the people. I think it's pretty clear. I can tell you, we worked very hard to get West Lafayette to accept this APC regulation, which we supported. And we worked very hard to get the police department and the rest of the people to enforce things. We don't want to make exceptions the rule. We don't want to become a transient neighborhood. I mean, clearly. Students, I'm a professor emeritus. Students can be educated. Make them sign a lease, you keep them there for a year, you can whip them into shape. But transients are transient, it's tough. Thank you.
Thank you. And just would like to remind people that I don't think we've had too much of an issue with it, but to please not bring up other issues that people have brought up before. But if you'd like to come up and say something, please feel free to.
Hello there. I'm Jordan Gooch at 275 Lincoln Street. We've been there since 2018, and I am one of the statutorily notified individuals. I chose, instead of writing a letter, to appear today to bring to the board's attention how important this is to the neighborhood and to us. And as far as actual issues go that have not already been mentioned by the previous presenters. As a relatively young person in the room, and haven't been there for 10, 20, 40 years, the reason I chose to live in this neighborhood, at the time working as an appraiser, I saw the entirety of Greater Lafayette. I was able to get into this neighborhood and chose to be here because of the walkability, because of the community, because of the programs like the New Chauncey program who helped me get into the house in the first place. It's an incredibly valuable resource and it's unique in the area. There is not a replacement for this kind of neighborhood. There just isn't. Adding transient rentals to this space will materially damage the spirit and the presentability of the space. It'll lower the property values over time. And essentially, we won't have recourse with the individuals. It'll be removing the rights of the people who would be long-term renters to have redress under the law and not at the whim of the property owners. And that's really all I have to say. It hasn't already been said, so thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition?
So I worked for 15 years for New Chauncey Housing Incorporated. Our work when there were houses that were affordable in the neighborhood and in the city.
If you give us your name and address.
Oh, sorry,
please.
Carol Lindquist at 230 Connolly Street. We live right behind Lincoln Park. So 3 houses down from this proposed development. We've worked so hard to attract families, and you sometimes being able to use the federal funds to help low to moderate income people come in. That preserves the community in many ways, and homeownership we know has very valuable assets for the community as well as the homeowners themselves. Another Airbnb or Vrbo will chip away at our ability to keep it, to attract families and attract homeowners. It's neighborhood preservation.
Thank you. Speaking in opposition. Yeah, please sign in after you.
Good evening, Carol Lancaster. I live at 248 Connolly Street. My home is directly behind the home in question, and they are just west, one lot west of my home. And I just have a couple of things I'd like to say that haven't already been said, because I feel very similar to many of the others. But the one thing I would like to point out is the pictures that Nate showed about what a day after might look like for a student rental versus a transient rental. You really don't see that on Lincoln and Connolly. I can't say that I've seen anything that looks like that. You know, we do have obviously student rentals, and any of us that live down in that area know that we live amongst students. Our area that we're talking about right now tonight, we are very family oriented, we're very residential oriented, and I think anyone who knows very much about New Chauncey would tell you that. I have plenty of student rentals right around me as well. And I have actually, much like Rich said, you know, we try to help our young students learn what it means to be responsible citizens. And I, you know, have myself spoken with them and said, you live amongst residents, you live amongst families. This is how you park. This is how you do this. And they respond. They respond. And I think that's our biggest concern, is that, you know, we're not going to have that opportunity to become neighbors, which is what we are. We are a neighborhood. I've lived in West Lafayette my entire life, and I love West Lafayette, and I don't condone a neighbor or anyone using our homes that should be for families and residents or students who are learning to become respectable citizens. I don't condone anyone using our properties for transient money-making ventures. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaking in opposition. Last chance. Having none, what do we have?
There's one who's nervous. Yeah.
Okay.
No, I have nothing more to say. I agree with everything. And
We got one more. Okay, one more.
Good evening. My name is Melissa Fraderigo. Excuse me. I live at 249 Lincoln Street, directly across from an Airbnb that's located at 250 Lincoln Street. That was one of the images that was shared in the initial presentation. While those pictures, the ones that we had the opportunity to see, demonstrate the beauty that the Gustuses have put into this home that they've purchased and other rentals, how nice they look on the street, those are simply aesthetics. That does not take into account the level of sound that comes from a transient resident. The house across the street from us, the Airbnb, the first few months were really rough. They had up to 8 guests up all night using power tools, 15 feet from our neighbor's bedroom for more than a week. They had a party with 10-plus college students. They were drunk in the backyard, and they also had a guest bring a shotgun from his truck into the house. My neighbors were able to contact the owner, and she subsequently attempted to book longer-term residence. And though things have improved somewhat, the addition of transient housing has made the neighborhood much less safe and discourages families, especially those with young children, from moving in. New Chauncey was once a special place where neighbors knew and looked out for one another, and the more Airbnbs that we have, the more we are at the mercy of transients. I hope that the city and county supports our desire to restrict the Airbnb zoning variance so our neighborhood can continue to be a place where neighbors are invested in one another and committed to improving the quality of life in West Lafayette. Thank you.
Thank you. Last chance for speaking in opposition. Mr. Gustus, would you like to rebut?
I guess on the no more than 6 people, I just want to make sure that we are on the same page, that it's a family plus 2 unrelated, no more than 3 unrelated. Also, the parking in question is bad without me having any occupants in the home right now. I can require my guests to park in the driveway. My driveway is 110 feet long. It's got a 2-car parking area in front of the garage. The guests will not have access to my garage, but the parking situation, I believe, can be easily addressed with that. The next door neighbor to my east, that was owner occupied. The neighbor to the north, that was owner occupied when I purchased this property on Lincoln Street. They've both sold, and both are now student rentals. So they took 2 parking spots. There are 2 cars that were there, and now they have 3 students in the property to the east of me and 2 tenants, I think maybe just 1 over the summer. But that's oftentimes occupying most of the street parking through the parking lot, almost to the point where I can't even pull in and out of the driveway to access my property. I'm the person that shovels the snow. My daughter mows the lawn at this property. I'm the one raking leaves. I'm the one maintaining the property. I'm the one interacting with neighbors. So I would argue that I am still able to act as a neighbor. I live 6 houses away. I'm able to treat all the local neighbors as if we occupy that property. Any other questions?
Just a couple items that were brought up, I just wondered your comment on. The commitment actually is just occupancy shall be limited to 6 guests. Are you saying that you were thinking that it's just no more than 3 unrelated guests?
No more than 3 unrelated guests or a family plus 2 unrelated. That is the expectation that I have with the city of West Lafayette per the rental housing ordinance.
I don't think that's part of the commitment. Do I understand that correctly?
That's not part of the commitment. I don't know if that's what if the city has any thoughts on that. I mean, on their enforcement.
I have 2 beds in the property. I'm not trying to stack 10 people or 20 people or 8 people for that matter.
So is it a 2-bedroom or a 3-bedroom?
It's a 3-bedroom. Currently, it's set up as 2 bedrooms and an office.
Gotcha. And then the other question, and I'm not sure how you address that in a commitment, but reading some of the letters during typically probably football games on the weekends, sometimes out-of-town people rent that, and then that's their congregation point. So I'm not sure how you, which is common over there, people tailgating. I'm not sure how that could be limited, because that could get unruly.
Yeah. I think that part of me being nearby and approximate location to this home that, I'm walking by this house multiple times a day, nearly every day. Our guest rules, I can enforce and require, any guest that comes over to visit, even after a football game to congregate, they have to be registered. I have to know that, and we have a maximum policy. The noise levels, the quiet hours, I can enforce that. 2 weeks ago, we had a student rental that's directly across the street from ours. On a Wednesday night, they had a graduation party wanting to congregate and have all their friends over after graduation. And they came over and told us they were going to have that, and we're okay with it. But it doesn't mean it wasn't disturbing at 1 in the morning when they were still up congregating out at a fire pit and drinking. And I think one of the neighbors even said one of the people from the student rental passed out at Lincoln Park. That can happen with any rental. That was a student rental.
Yeah. Thank you.
And I guess, how do you plan on enforcing your guest rules, the quiet hours, no parties, that type of thing?
Like I said, with the decibel meter inside, so it'll alarm them if the noise level gets above a certain acceptable level, and then I can enforce it by monitoring who's coming and going out the front of the property.
What about outside?
No, I don't have any sort of outside area for congregating, so I'm not encouraging them to congregate at a fire pit or congregate outdoors and really do anything. My intent is to communicate to guests that this is a neighborhood. You're living amongst families. You need to be respectful of that. So just like we're supposedly training college students how to live in a neighborhood, we can do the same with guests. Just like when I travel on my family and we go visit and we stay in a neighborhood in a city, we're respectful to those around us.
Thank you. Anyone else have questions?
Thanks.
Thank you. If there are no other questions, we have a ballot.
I have 5 ballots, 4 in favor, that is 4 yes, 1 against, that is 1 no.
Special exception is approved. And let's please be respectful.
We'll call you guys at 3 when we have all the police. Can we have your phone numbers so we can call you at 3 a.m.? Really?
You can always call the city or
Yeah, we do call the city.
or the
We do. This
petitioner.
West Lafayette police can only do so much. You are really disappointing. Thanks, neighbor.
Just waiting till Tom and Ed got back.
I move to hear and vote on BZA 2106 Purdue Research Foundation. Petitioners requesting the following variance for a proposed research facility in an I-2 zone. Number 1, to reduce the required parking standard from the minimum 31 spaces to 4 parking spaces, or 13% of the total required. UZO 4-6-3. Number 2, to increase the maximum coverage by all buildings from 35% or 28,951.86 square feet to 38% or 30,804 square feet. UZO 2-2-6 in number 3, to reduce the minimum vegetative coverage from the required 25% or 20,679.9 square feet to 11% or 9,430 square feet. UZO 2-22-6. The property is known as proposed Lot 3 of Purdue Research Park Aerospace District, is located on the east side of Allison Road, just north of Purdue Airport, specifically 506 Allison Road in West Lafayette, Wabash 24 Southwest 23-5.
And do I have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second, and we'll hear from staff, please. Amanda, please.
I will actually be presenting the next one as well, since the lots are right next to each other. So I don't know if, Gary, you want to go ahead and...
Go ahead and put them both on. We'll vote on them separately, but
I move to hear together and vote on separately BZA 2107 Purdue Research Foundation. Petitioners requesting a variance for a proposed research facility to reduce the minimum vegetative coverage from the required 25%, 23,650.2 square feet, to 18%, 17,028.1 square feet on property which is as proposed as Lot 2, Purdue Research Park Aerospace District, and is located on the east side of Allison Road, just north of Purdue Airport, specifically 502 Allison Road in West Lafayette, Wabash 24, Southwest 23-5.
I second.
and a motion and a second for that one. We'll go ahead and hear both cases.
Thank you. So we are On the west side of West Lafayette here, you can see the Purdue Airport. The site in question is zoned I2, which is our medium-intensity industrial. It's part of Purdue Research Foundation's land holdings out here, where they have already constructed, Rolls-Royce is up here near the intersection of 231 and Newman. The new chip manufacturing facility is going to be going in somewhere over here. Saab is back here. So it's a big facility out here by PRF, where they are proposing to build a new research facility for Rolls-Royce. They did record their final plat earlier this week, so we are good as far as that is concerned. Right now, the property is undeveloped. It's pretty wide open, as you can see from the aerials here. And what they're proposing, I will let the petitioner speak to that a little bit more, because I don't know a whole lot about research or the facility in question. But because of the way that they want to develop both of these lots, they are going to go over on their coverage for building on this lot, as well as not providing enough vegetative coverage as per the UZO. The third, or actually the first variance here that's listed is for a parking variance. While both of these lots are going to be treated as one campus, they are two separate lots. I believe at some point the petitioner may wish to sell off one of the lots, so that's why they wanted to have them separate. But this back lot only has 4 parking spaces. Even so, as explained to us by the petitioner, most of the people going to be on site will be able to use those 4 spaces, as well as the larger number of spaces up on the other lot here closer to the road. You can see the site plan here. Again, I'm going to let the petitioner speak a little bit more to the site plan. And then here's the other lot, where the variance on this one is just for the vegetative coverage. This is 2107. They meet the parking requirements here because all of the parking, or most of the parking, is on this lot. And again, it's just because of the way that the facility is going to be situated and how big the facility is, as well as some of their outside equipment that contribute to the lot coverage as far as building and vegetative coverage. Now, these lots were just created by PRF. So even though we are just looking at these 2 lots specifically as far as lot coverage, they own the rest of the land around it. So we don't know what they have planned for it, but the rest of this land is, theirs to develop as they wish, but we do have to make sure that we are looking at it just for these 2 lots as far as coverage is concerned. So, if that's not confusing enough, I apologize. On 2106, we have 3 variances. Staff is supportive of reduced parking. The petitioner knows exactly how many employees are going to be on site on any given day. They said at max, they're going to have, 33 or 35 parking spaces, or they have 37 available, okay, total. And that might happen maybe 2 or 3 days a month. The rest of the time, they may only have 5 to 6 employees on site. So we're trusting that they know how their research facility operates, how many parking spaces they're going to need. This isn't a place where the public can come and visit where they're going to need additional parking spaces. It is going to be strictly for this research facility. In regards to the lot coverage, again, it's because of the nature of the facility that they are building. But in staff's opinion, they created these lots, so they kind of created this situation. It is not a hardship in that case. So we were having a hard time coming up with a UZO-defined hardship because they did create this situation as far as the lot coverage is concerned. So we are recommending approval for the parking variance, which is number 1 on BZA 2106, but denial for the increased building coverage, which is variance number 2, And denial for variance number 3, which is the reduced vegetative coverage. For BZA number 2107, this was a variance for vegetative coverage. Again, this is a self-created hardship, so we could not recommend it. We are recommending denial for this one as well. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Petitioner, his or her representative.
Hello, I am Brittany Heidenreich with Purdue Research Foundation, 1281 Win Henschel Boulevard, West Lafayette. I also have Marie Seppel with Rolls-Royce here with me today. As Amanda mentioned, PRF is building 2 buildings on these 2 parcels. Rolls-Royce will be the sole tenant of both of these buildings. The front building there in the colored area here on the west lot, that will be the test facility building where full engine testing will be done. The rear building to the east is a support building that would support the functions within that test facility. As Amanda mentioned, we're combining these cases, so I'll run through all 4 variance requests for coverage and for parking. So while not defined as a hardship by the UZO, this is a practical hardship for us as we're planning for the flexibility of future ownership of these parcels and also for the master plan development for this overall 27 acres. This would be the first phase of an overall future development here. So setting these parcels up for the future, the parcels make sense so that we have the flexibility in the future to account for that, what we need for the master plan. So why the green space variance? A lot of these outdoor equipment requires areas for exhaust, and grass is not the best solution next to these outdoor equipment pads. So we are proposing landscape stone in those areas for maintenance and safety reasons, and that takes us to the percentages that we're presenting here today. Now, Amanda, if you could go to the overall aerial here. So as we look at these 2 parcels individually, that is what we're here requesting from the BZA today. So the building coverage, the minimum requirement is 35%. With the lot only, we are at 38% building coverage, exceeding 3%. When you include the existing regional detention that serves this parcel at the northern border of the site, that's about 2.5 acres. If you include the proportionate share of that green space of the regional detention, that actually takes the building coverage of this area with that proportionate share to 34.2% under the 35% maximum building coverage. When you look at the green space requirement for that lot, it's a 25% minimum vegetated cover. With the stone that we're proposing and the hardscaped areas, we're at 11%. If you look at the proportionate detention area on that, that takes us to 20.2% vegetated coverage. Also with Lot 3, so that's the second case, sorry, Lot 2, that's the second case there, the western parcel. That is a 25% minimum vegetated cover. When you look at the lot only, what we're requesting is 18%. When you include the detention area, that takes us up to 28.8%, exceeding that minimum requirement. Furthermore, with the minimum vegetated cover, if you look at the 2 parcels combined with the detention area, that takes us to 24.8%, near the 25% minimum requirement. In regards to the parking variance, Amanda mentioned that there will be shared parking between the lots, and what Rolls-Royce is proposing for employees they will be able to handle within the parking provided of the 37 spaces between both lots combined. With that, we're happy to answer any questions, Maria and myself. We respectfully request approval on all three variances for this case for 2106 and the green space coverage variance for 2107. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the petition?
Chad Spitznagel, Building Commissioner, Administrative Officer. We've worked really closely with PRF on the combined project and agree with Brittany that the overall plan of the parks helped in some of the issues that they need to get the variances for. We're happy with all the life safety items. West Lafayette Fires added to all their thoughts, and we're happy to proceed with this. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor? Anyone in opposition? Questions, comments from the board?
I have a couple of questions. So regarding the vegetation minimums, you're proposing that we include part of the drainage that's maybe a quarter of a mile away in your calculations, and that's how we're going to come close to our percentages?
We're still asking for the lots on their own for the variances, the minimum coverage requirement. So we're asking for you to consider the lots only, but when you look bigger picture and include the detention that is on that parent parcel and serves, and it is a detention facility for these two lots. We do take our drainage there. Those percentages get closer to the minimum or maximum from a building coverage and green space requirement.
Second question I had is, there was comments that were made, it was, well, first of all, you just plotted the land and there's a lot of ground around you. You came up with these boundaries very specifically, and there was talk about flexibility, it was planned for flexibility. With only 4 parking spots, so something says in the future, they may not be together. Mm-hmm. And I had questions about one lot only has 4 parking spaces.
Right.
So you guys are contemplating that it might not be together in the future. So then what do you do with 4 parking spots and all that space? Then you got to figure about how many handicap spots would you be needed? What do you do when it snows, and where do you go with your snow in that situation? You know, the fact that you didn't make it into one lot, there has to be some type of thought that you guys were thinking of something in the future. And also, you could have went out another 20 feet, 50 feet, and maybe major things, but this was very specific and planned with parking and lot number 3, 4 spaces.
Yeah. So if these parcels were ever under separate ownership, there would be a shared parking agreement between these 2 parcels. And there are the primary use of the Lot 2 and why we have the parking out front is that is where the majority of employees are going to be accessing the building. The support building is a secondary building. And Robert, to answer your question about the strategic place of where we platted those property lines, in the future, that support building could be expanded. As part of the next phase of the master plan.
Is that on the support building?
The support building is on Lot 3. Yes, yeah, the rear lot.
With regard to parking, a shared parking agreement, is that going to be in the deed for those lots?
It was not a part of the plat. It would be in the deed of if that parcel is transferred to ownership other than Purdue Research Foundation.
Or that's what your plan would be?
That would be the plan, yes.
Thank you.
To follow up on that, so if the potential is to possibly expand the building that's in the rear I mean, I assume it'd be either to the north or to the east, that you would then add land or replat
Yes.
that in order to, and if that were to happen, then you could add more parking as well.
Yes.
But as it stands, the way that they were currently platted, this is what you're with.
Correct. Yeah. Thank you, Steve.
And I guess I have a question for staff. Is it my understanding, or is it just business or lots that can have variable, that, I guess until you file the final plans, the final detailed plans, can you actually change the lot lines for an I-2 zone?
Not a whole lot once you get past the preliminary approval phase of a subdivision. The point of not being able to hear this until it was final platted is these lots didn't exist until they were recorded.
That's true.
So having a variance for something that doesn't exist didn't really make a whole lot of sense.
I should have realized that with the note that was on the original staff report. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? If not, we have 4 ballots. On 2106, variance number 1, reduce parking spaces. There are 5 in favor and 1 against. That's 5 yeses, 1 no for...
There should only be 5 ballots. I misspoke, excuse me. For 2106, variance number 1, reduced parking spaces, I have a total of 5 ballots. 4 are in favor, that is 4 say yes, 1 is not in favor, and that's 1 says no. So that's 4-1 on variance number 1 of 2106. 2106, variance number 2, to increase building cover. I have 5 yeses, that is unanimous in favor. On 2106, number 3 variance, I have 5 ballots, and all 5 are in favor. That is 5 yeses, 0 noes, and that's 2106, variance number 3. On 2107, on the single variance, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in favor. That is 5 yeses and 0 noes for 2107.
Thank you. All 4 variances for those 2 cases combined have been approved. Administrative matters.
We have none.
Since Dustin's back in here, unless any member has an objection, the chair will order the findings of each member casting a vote for the majority decision of the board to be the collective findings of the board in support of the decision of the board. Hearing none, it is so ordered, and I will take the last motion.
Move to adjourn.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
This conference is no longer being recorded.
Yeah. He almost made it up here on that one, but it's, yeah.